Oh, well, hello there. Welcome back to part 3 of the Hardleg Discord Democracy Project. If you missed the first 2 videos on this subject, there's links down in the description, but the very brief synopsis is, Video 1, I'm turning my patrons-only Discord into a democracy. The patrons will be able to elect from among themselves senators and moderators, and they will make and enforce the rules. It'll be a neat, fun project that everyone will be able to be involved in and maybe learn a little something about civic engagement. And then in part 2, I wrote a constitution for that government, some guardrails to form a foundation that everything can be built upon. And more importantly, I announced that there would be a vote to ratify that constitution. It doesn't go into effect unless at least 10% of the people on the Discord vote on it, and at least 60% of those votes are yes. And as you could probably tell by me being here now, we succeeded in that, with a final vote count of 48 yes, 4 no, and 1 abstain. And you know, it's actually kind of impressive because I realized almost as soon as I put out that video how impossibly high it was to get 10% of the people to vote on something. If you look at like real world examples like the US Constitution, I think that had less than 40 people ratify it. And that was a country with like at least 1 million people in it, so you're talking about a very, very small amount. Getting 10% of people engaged is actually pretty high. This is also especially impressive because, as I've made clear, my Discord is for patrons only. You have to be on the Patreon in order to be on the Discord. And the funny thing is, my Discord has about 500 people on it, and my Patreon has about 420. So we've already found one problem that our fledgling government is going to have to deal with, and that's illegal immigration. There's a whole bunch of people here who have snuck past the border. Although, you know, if we're being perfectly candid, I don't really think it's a problem. When we have the votes, I will confirm that everyone who votes is on the Patreon, is an active member. But it's funny to see that this thing I didn't think would affect a Discord government is actually kind of here. But I digress. The point is, the Constitution was ratified, which means we can move on to the next step, which is elections. We will be having elections next month, and if that's the only thing you care about, if that's all you're interested in hearing, you can use the timestamps below and skip to that. But before we can talk about elections, we need to talk about election laws, and laws in general. Because originally my idea here was to just make the Constitution, hold some elections, and let the first Senate build the government from scratch, have them start with nothing and craft things however they want. And I realized that wasn't going to work for 2 main reasons. One, we kind of need laws in place to govern how the elections are going to work in the first place. And 2, I realized that a lot of people in my Discord, even if they're interested in this project, don't already know a whole lot about lawmaking, they don't know a lot about systems of government, so I figured it might be helpful while I was writing up election laws to basically give you a sample law book, a foundation to build upon, which is what I described the Constitution as, but this is fundamentally different. In fact, let's go ahead and start by reading off the top of this here. So in order to guide the first Senate in their duties and help ensure that our initial elections run smoothly, I've authored the first of many hard laws, which is just what we call laws in the Discord server. You know, I wanted to differentiate between what we're creating here online and like real laws, so I came up with a silly name. And that silly name is baked into the Constitution. You cannot change it. Silly names are a fundamental part of the Discord Democracy Project. And yeah, that kind of hammers home the idea that the Constitution is a bedrock. It's something that can't be changed. It's the guardrails. But this is just laws. These are the same things senators can make. I fully encourage the Senate to remove, change, add to these laws however they see fit. They can erase this entire document and replace it with a whole other setting of their own. So as such, I'm not going to go over everything in here because a lot of this probably won't last the test of time. And also, most of this isn't important to your average citizen. Like, if you're not planning to run for office, very little of this actually affects you. And to explain why, we just go to this next section. You see, I've decided to divide hard laws into 2 distinct categories: rules and regulations. Rules apply to everyone in the server, and they're intended to govern general behavior. All patrons are responsible for knowing the rules of the server. It's part of your duty. Fortunately, there's only 4 rules, and they're all very simple. Rule 1, don't threaten, insult, stalk, or harass anyone on the server. Rule 2, don't impersonate anyone. Don't post pornography, don't use slurs. And then in addition to those rules, I just added this little segment saying if someone violates the rules, patrons are encouraged to screen cap that event and then bring the evidence to a moderator, either by pinging them or sending them a private message. So if you're just a citizen, that's all you really need to know. Very simple. And I put a note here specifically for the other senators to let them know my reasoning here. So I strive to have as few rules as possible, and to keep those rules simple so they can be easily understood by everyone. I've also purposely kept the rules vague, because I believe that narrowly defining the rules leads to people purposely skirting the edge of what's acceptable, rule sharking. The intention of the rules is always more important than the literal text. And the intention of all hard laws, as laid out in the Constitution, is to provide an enjoyable and comfortable environment for all the patrons. Moderators should always keep this in mind when trying to decide if a rule is broken. So basically, I never want to run into a situation where someone is making people miserable, doing something that annoys everyone, that makes the server a bad place to be, and they're like, well, technically they aren't stalking someone, technically they're not harassing someone, so we can't do anything. No, if what you're doing is making things bad, if it's really close to harassment or whatever, we're just gonna call it harassment. And same thing with the other side of the coin. I never want to run into a situation where someone does something and everyone is fine with it. Most people are like, that was understandable. Either it was a mistake or it was meant in good humor. I don't think you did anything wrong, but technically you broke the rules, so we're going to have to punish you. The way I see it, if you fall into that situation, you have lost the plot. If you're just punishing people because of the rules and ignoring why those rules exist, then you have forgotten the point of government, which at least in this case is to make the lives of the people that are governed better. So that's all I have to say about rules, and then the rest of the document is regulations. Regulations deal with the management of the server. Their purpose is to guide the senators and the moderators in the performance of their office. Regulations should be posted publicly for the patrons to read if they want to, but patrons are not expected to know the regulations. They mostly apply to the government. Ideally, at least in my eyes, the perfect government is one where the citizens have to do as little work as possible. The government works to serve the citizens, so they don't have to know all these regulations. The people who have elected to take on the responsibility of being an office in the government, it's their job to know all these technical details and everything and enforce them for the benefit of the citizens. So if you are interested in becoming a senator or a moderator, I would encourage you to read this whole document from start to finish. It's like 7 pages. To some people that's really long. I don't think it's that much, but it's certainly longer than the Constitution, and some of it can get kind of technical. As for this video, I'm not really going to go over everything. I'm just going to give you the bare bones rundown so you get a couple of the basic ideas. So like Regulation A is all about moderators. The one perhaps interesting thing about this is that the moderators have their own private board on the server, something that no one else can see and no one else can talk to. I think it's very important for the enforcement arm of the government to have some level of secrecy. They need to be able to investigate claims of wrongdoing without the wrongdoers knowing they're being investigated. Because if they did, they would erase and cover up evidence and stuff like that. Of course, it's worth reminding everyone that these laws are subject to change. If you're looking at this and you're like, I don't like that, that doesn't sit right with me at all, I think government needs to be transparent as possible, then run for senator. Make that part of your platform. Say that you believe it's important for the moderators not to have a private board, and if you're elected to Senate, you'll try to change this law to make it so that they're public, so that they have accountability. Go for it. You're free to do that. If you disagree with me, perfectly understandable. I acknowledge that I am one person, and one person is not going to be able to write laws as well as everyone pooling their intelligence together. I mean, that's the whole idea behind democracy in the first place, is that none of us is as smart as all of us. Other than that, it's just a whole bunch of technical rules, how mods can apply timeouts for how long they can, how appeals work, how kicking people works, what happens if the moderators think one of themselves has committed a crime, how do you moderate the senators, yada yada, a bunch of stuff you don't need to know unless you want to be a moderator. Regulation B deals with the Senate. And the main thing I want to point out here is that the Senate is the opposite of the moderators in a lot of ways. You know, they're not dealing with potential criminals. They're discussing laws that are going to affect everyone, the rules and regulations that people have to live by. And as such, I think the senatorium, which is what I've named the board where the senators meet, should be publicly visible to all patrons so that they can watch the debate take place and see how the government works. As for how it works, I've got like a 10-step process of how a bill becomes a law. Maybe that's too complicated, maybe it's not complicated enough. It does include like a fast track system where if all the senators agree that a bill is good, they can just pass it without having to do a vote. And it's worth noting that with how the Constitution is right now, we're only going to have about 7 senators, so it's not going to be like this huge quorum like a real-life government. It's going to be a pretty small selection of people. And that finally brings us to elections, the main thing this video is about, the thing you might have skipped ahead in the video to try to find out. Hello people, welcome. You missed some interesting conversation, but it's fine. We're talking about elections now. So, first thing to know, as outlined in the Constitution, all elections will be conducted using single transferable vote, where voters are allowed to rank their candidates in order of preference. So if you're unfamiliar with this system, at least on your end, like as a voter, it's pretty simple. You're going to have a list of candidates, people who are running for office, and all you do is mark down which ones you like in the order you like. So for instance, if there's only one candidate you like, only one person that you want for the job, you write number 1 and then their name. And then you're done. That's all you have to do. You don't have to vote for multiple people if you don't want to. You can just select the one person you like the most. But let's say you know that that person isn't popular. You know that like your vote is probably going to be the only vote they get. Or let's say that like, you know, you want to vote for yourself, but you also want to support other candidates. You can put vote number 1 and then put a 2. The 2 is, you know, if person number 1 can't win, this is my second choice. Put their name. And you can go so on and so forth. You can rank every candidate who is going for office. You can do a top 3, a top 5. It does not matter. As for how the votes are actually counted and tallied, that's a bit complicated, but that's a problem for future me to deal with. If you're really curious, you can ask about it down in the comments. If there's enough interest, maybe I'll make a video about it. Otherwise, you can also look up like single transferable vote on YouTube, and there's a bunch of videos explaining it. But needless to say, this kind of stops any shenanigans that you might do with voting. It also works best in a situation like this where we don't have like districts or states, you know? Everyone's just voting in one thing, but we need 7 people. So the top 7 people among all the different like rankings or whatever are going to be the ones who become senators. Now another thing to note here is that unlike the vast majority of countries, the ballots are going to be public. You're going to be posting your ballot on a Discord board where everyone can see it. This is being done purely for practical reasons. I don't have an easy, simple way to do private ballots. There's not really like any website I could find that would help you run a complex election like this without charging you a bunch of money. And I don't think I want to do something where people are sending me emails, because that makes it more susceptible to fraud. By having everyone on the Discord, it's much easier to keep track of who is who, who's voting and everything like that. Maybe in the future we'll change this. If anyone out there has an idea of how I can do STV votes privately, let me know down in the comments because I'm interested. But for now, for the sake of being practical, they're going to have to be public knowledge. So just keep that in mind. You know, don't promise you're going to vote for someone if you're not actually going to do it, because they're going to be able to see it. As for how and when the elections will actually take place, they will be held once a year during the last week of April. April in general is elections month. During the first week of April, I'm going to make a candidate role on the Discord server. Any patron who meets the requirements, which I'll remind you is just being on the server for 6 months, can request that role from me. There'll be a board for it. I'll make something in Democracy where you can ping me easily or just put your name and I will add the senatorial role. It's that easy. Then, during the second week of April, a text channel will be created where candidates can write up a single post laying out their reasons for seeking office, their goals should they win, and why people should vote for them. This is how we make everything equal. In the real world, the problem we run into is that rich people can buy ads, and the more money you have, the more ads you can buy. Here, you've got one place you can put ads. You're not allowed to advertise anywhere else. That's the one place that you can explain everything, and you get one shot to do it. So, you know, think long and hard. You have a whole week, write it up, edit it, make it look nice, and then post however much you want to put on there. Could be one sentence, could be a whole paragraph, several pages if you really want to. Although, you probably want to keep it fairly simple because the Discord government is not that complicated. So you'll have one full week to get together, edit your post, and then at the end of the second week, I'm going to lock the board. At which point, I'm going to hold a special stream where I'll read all the candidate statements out loud. And depending on how well this video does, I might even make a YouTube video out of it. So, you know, instead of buying advertising space, everyone gets the same advertising space. Me. You get to be on my channel where I will read your statements out loud for everyone to see. And I will do my best to remain neutral and not try to influence the outcome by being like really ironic or silly. I'm just gonna try to keep it straightforward. However, I will point out if a senator promises to do something that violates the Constitution. You know, if you're like, I'm gonna turn this into a Pokemon server, I'll be like, you actually can't do that, it's against the Constitution. Once that goes up and everyone's had a chance to watch the video or the VOD, whatever it ends up being, then during the last week of April, which I think will be the end of the third week or the start of the fourth week, I'll have to look it out exactly, but you know, you'll have a week to vote. We'll put up the voting thing, you'll have your chance to rank everyone based on what you like, and whoever gets the most votes according to the STV system, those people will be given the roles and will become the first senators for a full year. If all that runs smoothly and everything works out, then the moderator elections will happen in May, and they'll be pretty much the same exact thing. You know, we're just gonna repeat the same process we did, unless there's problems. You know, there's a chance that we might have to move these to June. There's a chance we might have to change up how we do something. But I imagine it would be pretty much the exact same process just for moderators. So just to recap, if you're a citizen, all you have to do is there will be one video or VOD where I read out statements from all the potential candidates. And then a week later, you get to choose, you know, top 5, top 7, top 10. Which ones do you think are best and rank them? That's it. That's all you have to do. You have their statements and you have the election. Easy as pie. If you actually want to be a senator, all you have to do is request the role at the start of April, write out your candidate statement that you want me to read on the VOD, and then vote if you want to. I mean, I guess you don't have to vote, but it'd be weird to be like that into the project and not vote. But yeah, overall, I think I've streamlined it and made it as simple and painless as possible. Maybe it's too simple and we'll have to complicate it in the future. Maybe we can streamline it anymore. Again, I want to reiterate, especially for those who didn't watch the beginning half of the video, all of these rules and regulations can be changed by the Senate. If the Senate decides that the first election was like a hell, or if they don't like having to run the second election, they can always like change how this is ran. as long as they use single transferable vote and they have a democratic process where everyone is involved. I think those are the only limitations in the Constitution. It's also worth mentioning, because someone's asking in chat, can you choose not to participate at all? Yeah, sure. If you don't want anything to do with any of this, it'll barely affect you, most likely. I mean, I can't imagine that the senators would make, like, crazy laws that are going to make the server require active participation. I'm not even sure how you would do that. I feel most people would just leave if you annoyed them too much. But for the vast majority of people who just want a cool place to chill out, like, it's probably good to know what the rules are, but you don't have to vote, you don't have to pay attention, you don't have to request the laws or whatever, but the tools are there so that if you're like, yeah, you know what would make this server a lot better if we had, like, a movie night. You could request for the Senate to add a movie night, and maybe they would host one, who knows? And then from there, the only other regulations are just establishing what boards exist in the Discord server and what roles we have. And people who are already on the Discord server might notice that I've only listed like 9 boards here, when the server currently has like 30 of them. And that's because I only wanted to officially, legally establish the ones that I think are critically important for the server to run. You know, things like having a rules and announcements board. Obviously we need boards to talk about democracy for the senators, for the mods, and I personally need like a board where I can run something like the ladder climb polls. That's for all the $10 patrons who get to vote on what deck I play every month. I humbly ask that the Senate keep all of these here. Everything else, like the video games board and the funny pictures board and the politics board, all the stuff like that, that'll be up to them to decide if they want to keep it or get rid of it. Technically, all the boards and roles should be established by legal precedent. I just did half of the work so that they can have a more active role in deciding what to keep, what to get rid of. And likewise, I've done the same thing with the roles. You know, I've included all the ones that we need for the Democracy Project. I've included the one for, like, the $10 patrons who vote on the ladder climb polls. But I haven't included a bunch of the other roles that we have. Things like the book club, things like the squid role for the new person. Do you want to keep those? If you want to keep them going, then pass a law that makes them part of the official law book. If not, feel free to get rid of them, change them, add something else, remove those roles. And this, I hope, should give you some idea in terms of if you're running for senator, if you're trying to decide, well, what kind of policies would I actually have? These are like the main things that are going to affect people's lives. These are the things that are going to make the board more or less interesting. Run on what boards you want to keep, what boards you want to delete, what new roles you want to have. Do you want to have tournaments? Do you want to have a movie night? Do you want to have like a gaming board where people can stream? Entirely up to you and what neat ideas you come up with. And all of that I basically explained in this note. I probably should have just read the note, but I'm kind of improvising here. As a final note though, I wanted to say that unlike rules, regulations are intentionally written with very precise language to ensure that the server is managed with minimal confusion. I think that you kind of need a certain element of rules lawyering if you're going to get involved with politics and stuff. But again, this is the laws document. This is what the senators are writing. This is what they can replace. If you disagree with my philosophy as to how the rules and regulations are lined up, you can erase all of this and start from scratch. So for those of you thinking about running for Senate, here's my idea. What do you think of it? Do you want to replace it? Do you want to add to it? Do you think it's good? The sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't break the Constitution. And I'm honestly eager to see what people want. So I think with that, I'm going to call it here. I've explained everything I want to explain. Hopefully, if you're a citizen or a potential future senator or moderator, all your questions about what things are going to be like in the next month have been answered. And if not, you know, you can always comment down below or ping me on the Discord. You know, I'm pretty open to messages at almost any time unless I'm streaming. So thank you all for watching. Thanks again for ratifying the Constitution. I think this will be a fun experiment. And thanks to everyone in Twitch chat for putting up with my constant retakes and mumbling and everything like that. It's very nice to have an audience to keep me on pace. Otherwise, I'm gonna get going. So until next time, good luck and have fun. And I'll see you in April.